Hey, this is Peter Vesnas. I want to talk about Internet of Things and blockchain. IoT is a big topic. It's part of the 5-year plan in China right now, and major cloud companies around the world are making multi-billion-dollar bets on just what their vision for IoT is. And I think these cloud monopolies, of course, want this data in the cloud. And I have lately become obsessed with the home automation side of IoT, and have just been kind of like working on and thinking about what the future holds there, and then how things might go. For reference, Samsung is super into this space from the programmability and home customization side. They have the SmartThings platform, which is a cloud platform that devices in your home talk to. Apple's got their play, which is of course more of a closed ecosystem play. Amazon's in the mix now, having just purchased Eero, and they're making a number of other pushes in this area. And then Google, of course, with Nest. So there's these bets are being laid. If you wanted like a unicorn, like if you're a young entrepreneur reading this and think, I'd really like to start a company and sell it for $1 billion to a cloud monopoly, I think IoT home automation is probably a pretty good area to look at. What I'm most interested in, though, is the stuff that comes from my blockchain side of life, which is thinking about the data side and what the financial impact will be for those who get the data side right, and just kind of what the good and bad futures might be. So a month or two ago, I installed a piece of open source software in my home called Home Assistant, which is like a Python program that the first thing it does is it just talks to your network. It's who's out there, what are you doing, and it matches stuff up. And I was stunned to discover 20 to 25, maybe more devices that it could just know about and talk to in my house already. So I'm pretty technologically savvy. I was very surprised by how many there were, and also how chatty and trusting they were over the internet. So you could turn on or off my TV just by asking on my wireless network, and even with a one-click configuration, it could start talking to my router and tracking who was in my house and who wasn't. And both Android and iPhones will tell a little bit of information, the nickname of the phone, just to the Wi-Fi router, and so I could see people who which of my kids' friends had been literally walking by our house. Instantly. So this was a big eye-opener, and it just, I think as a side note, not even really a side note, I think it should remind us of why the cloud companies care about this so much. So every IoT device has one or more sensors on it. The sensors are running all the time. And these cloud companies are trying to build up as much competitive advantage with data as they can, and because data feeds AI, and they're convinced, and I think rightly so, that more data with better AI is going to lead to these just outsized advantages, competitive advantages. So there's sort of this war. It is, I think, consumers will probably feel it in 5 years, 5 years. But if you're looking for it, you can see the groundwork being laid now at these strategy groups. So the first thing I did was I thought, well, I want to put smart switches in my home, and I immediately went and had to find switches that are not on the cloud. The experience of having kind of so for me, I'm more privacy oriented. I don't want all my stuff talking to cloud service providers around the world. And so this is a very hard and tight constraint that a lot of people don't feel. But also if the power goes out, my home automation still works. I guess if the power goes out, my home automation doesn't work. But if the internet goes out, it does. Or if I get crossways with Google for some reason, I'll still be able to turn the lights on and off in my house instantly. So here's what I think those of you who are blockchain oriented should be thinking about IoT. There's data security to worry about, what do you want to trust, or who do you want to trust for getting your data out, and does blockchain have anything to say about that? And then there's just these privacy lessons that we have from the rest of the industry. So, the thing about IoT data is that it's so personal. Like, when is my bedroom light on? Who's moving in what room? This is just like, this is data like probably nobody really thinks about it once headed out in the world. And we are like kind of good and kind of bad at securing that data in blockchain land right now. And it's for me one of the key areas of innovation over the next couple of years in blockchain is doing better with data security. And actually, I personally have a couple inventions along those lines that I think help the data security story. But in general, like I would like to see the industry thinking more about like, okay, we have all these crypto tools. We know how to deploy them. We know how to motivate people to use them. We can say for certainty that something happened. We can make data censorship resistant, and can we like layer some of these techniques onto data that we might care about? Maybe not more than money, but in some ways maybe more than money even. So I think that's an area that is worth working on, both on a research side and on a practical side. Is like, how do we get secure data, the kind of data that's very personal? How do we build out systems and infrastructure that can manage that data safely, away from the eyes of the cloud monopolies? Maybe stored there, encrypted, maybe not. And I'd like to argue that the rewards for a group that did that would be pretty large. Now, it may be that, like, here's a problem that can happen with high-end, like, better tech that is just not fun to work with. It could be better, demonstrably better. Like, think like Linux in the 1990s, way better than Windows in the 1990s. However, hard to work with. And because of that, these technologies, and sometimes these open source technologies, can fail to win the market. I would say that the IoT market's in that place right now. Home Assistant is like the Linux of today in this space. Like, it does everything. They have like releases every 2 weeks. Like, it is just thousands of integrations in these different platforms. It's quite amazing, and it just comes because people love it and are hobbyists, and they have like a pretty good open source like sort of like contribution setup that they've done a good job at. On the other hand, like, this is not a product that a random person could install and manage in their house. It is so far from that. And I think, the history of a lot of these open source kind of like nerd projects is that they never get there. If you think about how much money Google had to put into Android to get Linux out in the hands of people, it's a significant endeavor. So I think one thing about thinking about this from a strategy point of view is like, even if you built this cool thing on blockchain, like, have you made it that much harder to use, and will anybody ever come? And the second question to ask really is just on like data scalability. So IoT data is, especially because a lot of it's sensor based, you're down to just like, what resolution do you want to keep and store this data at? A house with, like, homes will have hundreds to thousands of sensors in them in the next year or two, and keeping like even just 1 second resolution data on all that turns into a lot pretty fast. So like, I haven't needed like a database server in my house for many years, but I have one now just to keep track of all the data going on. So blockchain is just absolutely not ready for this scale of data times like 7 billion or whatever. And that's another area where scalability will probably unlock things. And so my rule of thumb is, if you have kind of an order of magnitude more speed, order of magnitude more storage, order of magnitude cheap, better price, then you get like a kind of a new class of innovations that come in. And so there's also a little bit of a weight right now. So people trying to build IoT plus blockchain together, I think it's a planning phase. I think it's a kind of thinking about what infrastructure needs to be built right now in order to support that. But the clock's ticking, like the cloud monopolies are moving there. And so if you're really like passionate about sort of like building a world in which home data could stay private, then I think it probably is a good time if you've got a longer range view. Best company I know of working in this space right now is a company called Gaia, founded by former Microsoft CTO David Vaskovich. Friends of mine, but no economic, I don't have any economic stake in their company right now. And they're just building out the kind of database technology that's needed, kind of like what David calls rules-based engine to program and deal with all this data in the home, and thinking about how you might actually deploy this hardware into the home. So I have a few thoughts about next steps here, but I think the main thing I want to say is hardware is a part of the picture. A lot of fundamental innovation left to do. Rewards probably very, very large. And very, very large competitors / buyers. So you got to kind of pick your poison and decide if that's how you want to go. That's my current thoughts on IoT. Thanks very much. We'll be back at you later.